Okay, hello everyone. Give me a little reaction if you guys can see and hear me. This is my first time using YouTube for live streaming, so I want to make sure it's all working properly. There's a little bit of a lag on it, so if I'm just sitting here for a second waiting for your responses. That's what's happening. Okay, good. People can see and hear me. Good. Okay, so we'll get this going, and hopefully that if you're tuning into this, you already know a little bit about me and a little bit about NXIVM and kind of where everything stands. But if you don't, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown of what we're going to be covering in these little chats and kind of who I am, what is NXIVM, who is Keith Raniere, all of that. Also, I just realized that Gatsby is over here as well, so we'll have a little co-host, I guess, for this. So first of all, if you don't know me, my name is Ayla Ferrone, and I am currently a reporter. Right now I live in Greenville, South Carolina, but this all started several years ago when I was working for News 10 ABC in Albany, and really for the last 2 years that I was a reporter there, I almost exclusively covered NXIVM. So myself and my photographer at the time, Chris Bulkey, we were running all around Albany, just, gathering information on NXIVM. And eventually when Keith Raniere was arrested and things started moving through the legal system, we were going down to Brooklyn to the federal courthouse there to cover those court proceedings. So I have been covering this for quite some time now. Even though I'm not in the Albany area anymore, I think that this is kind of a story that has really shaped who I am as a reporter now, and I think it really deserves continued attention. So, especially with, all the books that are coming out from people who have had some sort of connection. There we go. That's a new word. Connection and NXIVM, a connection. A connection to NXIVM, writing books. And, there's some podcasts out there. There have been a couple of documentaries, which is kind of, what sparked me to want to be doing this, is that HBO just came out with The Vow. So that is the latest one that's out right now. So I'm going to kind of do this, I think once a week. I'm going to give people a week to watch The Vow, the episode. So we'll be a week behind the episode that they're actually on. So episode 2 aired on Sunday, but today we'll be talking about episode 1. I think that will kind of give everyone a little bit of time to, get caught up and kind of organize their thoughts and see if they have any questions and things like that. So that's the plan. This is going to be like super casual. Obviously, you can tell, no makeup, hair's not done, I'm wearing like a t-shirt and like gym shorts. So this is not going to be your typical like news reporter on TV type of thing. I want it to be super interactive. So anytime you guys have any questions, or if there's a topic that you know about within NXIVM or about Keith Raniere that you would like to hear more about, either, you can tweet me, you can Facebook me, you can Instagram me, you can ask it here. If I don't know it now, I'll take note of it and I can, do a little research and get back to you in hopefully some following little live bits like this. Okay, so let's talk about The Vow. Episode 1, I want to know if you watched it and just kind of your initial thoughts of it first. So if you're watching and you've seen it, pop a little something in the comments and let me know what you thought. So I'm just going to kind of go through what happened in episode 1 for those of you who maybe weren't able to watch it yet or haven't seen it yet. No major spoilers here, but I will just let you know, if you want to be surprised, don't keep listening, although I hope you do stay. So The Vow episode 1 was first of all, I want to say I love the way that it was set up and kind of the mood of the entire episode, because I think it really captured what it was like for people who, you know, became very involved in NXIVM and very involved in ESP. You know, it really kind of embodied, I think, the hope that a lot of people had when they joined this group. And so I think that the episode did a really good job of setting all of that up and kind of putting the viewer in the mindset of someone who would have been looking to join ESP, which is, if you don't know, Executive Success Programs. It's kind of one of the subsections of NXIVM. All right, I see we're getting some comments right now. Planted by the Rivers, The Vow is streaming on HBO Max, so that's the only place that you can watch it. What I did right now, I'll be honest with you, I logged in for a free little trial through them, and I think it's like $15 a month or something like that. So this is the first time I've ever really paid for anything like this, but obviously it's something I'm interested in, so $15 a month, I said, hey, what the heck, right? Okay. Daniel says that episode 1 was very slow for him since it was mostly a recap, but good. I definitely agree with that. I think, you know, obviously filmmakers and people who are working on documentaries need to assume at the beginning that, you know, their viewers don't know anything about the topic. So there has to be a little bit of a review, but I think they did a good job in finding, you know, a unique way to kind of ease us into it. You know, they really used Mark Vicente and Sarah Edmondson kind of as, you know, the vehicle to lead us into this world. So I thought that that was a good way to do that. Okay, so like I mentioned, Mark Vicente and Sarah Edmondson, I would consider, you know, the key players in this first episode of The Vow. You don't need to be growling back there. He's mad because he's not getting very much attention, but that's okay. He really likes to be up here on this little ledge so he can see out. So the episode really starts with Mark Vicente, who, if you don't know who he is a filmmaker, pretty well known. I would say probably his most well-known piece of work is called What the Bleep Do We Know? And they talk about this a little bit in The Vow and kind of about how the exposure he got from that film kind of led top people in NXIVM to reach out to him and kind of say, you know, we're doing this thing, like, we'd love to kind of use your views and put them in with our views and let people know about different ways to see the world. So Mark is one of the main players in this first episode, and I would assume just the way this first episode went, I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of him in the future. I've met him a few times, you know, going to the trial and things like that. We do a little bit of chatting on Twitter here and there, just mainly about NXIVM related stuff. So I think that the way that you see him in the documentary is very much the way that I have interacted with him. So I don't know what value that adds to anything, but there's that. Sarah Edmondson is the other person who really drives this first episode. So Sarah Edmondson, I think a lot of people would consider kind of like the face of what broke this story. You know, she's the one who, her scar appeared on the front page of the New York Times when this all really, you know, started to break wide open. And so I think for a lot of people, at least for myself, she was the first person who, you know, I see this face, I see this woman, you know, she has a story to tell and it put a very personal angle on this. So she also is in this first episode, and she's a huge driver. She is an actress from Canada. And so basically the story goes in the episode that her and Mark meet on this cruise, and Mark kind of says, you know, I am part of this thing that I think you might be interested in, and Sarah goes to check it out. And that kind of gets us going in the story. Sean, hi Sean, it's so good to see you here in the chat. Thanks for joining in. He's asking how long did the trial last? So the trial lasted, I believe it was scheduled for 6 to 8 weeks. Don't quote me on that, but I think it lasted pretty much that amount of time. I was not there every single day in court. We were there for opening statements. Some of the key witnesses we wanted to make sure to be there for. Not everyone who we thought was going to be a witness ended up being a witness. So it was kind of like, it was a little bit hard to determine, it was kind of just like day to day. And also since we weren't in Brooklyn, we were in Albany. It's a 3-hour drive to get to Brooklyn from Albany. So planning and deciding when we would go was kind of like a crapshoot, to be honest with you. But I think that, it worked out really well, and the communications from inside the Eastern District of New York were very good at keeping us kind of attuned to exactly what we could expect, as much as they could tell us. They weren't giving us, too much inside information, and it wasn't really any information that we could put out to the public, but it was more for our planning purposes. So that type of thing really helped. When it came to deciding, when we would go and when we wouldn't go. One person who I know who was in court every day, at least from a journalist perspective, is Rob Gavin from the Times-Union, and he did some fantastic reporting on it. If you ever want to see, really a day-by-day of how that trial was, I highly suggest looking that up on the Times-Union. So it was really fantastic. Oh, Daniel says he was there at the end of the trial and for parts of Daniela's testimony. I wasn't there for Daniela's testimony. I've only read it in transcripts, but I can't imagine, the emotion that must have been in the room for that. So that's very interesting that you were there. I think the witnesses seemed very sincere, but I think that kind of one of the feelings I think a lot of people who were involved with NXIVM and ESP have is, I think that there's like a little bit of guilt there for some of them. And this is just my impression. Obviously, anyone who was a victim of Keith Raniere, I'm not trying to say that if they don't feel this way that they're not valid. This is just my impression from people who I've spoken with. So my impression is that, some people feel a little bit guilty that they were part of something that hurt people. And I think that that is something that some of these people, still carry with them about, like, kind of what part did I play in all of this. So I think that you could definitely see that a little bit on the stand from some of the people who testified. I can't imagine what it's like to have to testify in any type of court case, much less, a federal court case against, this guy who the prosecution says had so much power over people, like in every aspect of their life. I just can't imagine, the type of strength and the type of preparation and the emotions that would come from having to do something like that. So we're still like talking about the first episode, but I'll kind of do what I've been doing, answering some questions as I see them pop up. And if anyone is watching on Facebook or Twitter or anything else, just make sure if you do have questions that you pop them in the live chat that is on the YouTube live link, because that's the one I'm monitoring. Just want to make sure that I see everyone there. So there were like some really key points of NXIVM that were discussed in the first episode of The Vow. And Daniel kind of mentioned, for a lot of us who have been covering it, it was a little bit of an overview. But I think to really understand how NXIVM works, they were important points to bring up. So as we mentioned, ESP is Executive Success Programs, and it's kind of like a subset of NXIVM. So think of NXIVM as like the umbrella, right? And then ESP is one of the kind of tracks that you can take underneath this umbrella. So there's ESP, there's The Source, there's Jeunesse, there is Rainbow Cultural Garden. There are like tons of little like sub-companies underneath the big company that is NXIVM. So if that helps you kind of visualize, because I know I'm a very visual learner, if that helps you visualize kind of, how that works, hopefully that's a little bit helpful. So ESP was, also one of the first parts of NXIVM. So you'll hear people talk a lot about it who were in NXIVM for a while because it was one of the first programs that they had. So basically ESP was meant to optimize human potential. And in the episode of The Vow, you'll see Nancy Salzman leading a lot of those sessions and those teachings. One thing I thought was really interesting, and I know that she's not the only one who went through something like this, but Sarah Edmondson in the episode talks about how, she went to the first 2 days and she thought it was kind of dumb and she didn't really get it. And she was like, kind of thought it was like BS. And I think that's so interesting that she can look back on her experiences and talk about that, because I know she's not the only one. If you have ever heard Catherine Oxenberg talk about her story, she actually, took her daughter India to some of these classes, and India, grasped right onto it, and it was a very long battle for Catherine to get her daughter out of NXIVM. But Catherine, it wasn't something that served her, and she kind of thought it was BS, kind of like how Sarah did, but she chose to leave. And Sarah says in the episode about how Mark asked her to stay through day 3, and she did, and that's when she kind of felt more connected to NXIVM. So I just think that's kind of interesting how some of these stories that we're hearing in The Vow are relating back to some other stories that we've heard. And I kind of I had some thoughts about some questions that I've had people who I know ask me. One of my coworkers asked, well, how do these people get sucked into this? Like, why don't they see through it, and why don't they understand that this is something that is not good? And I think there's like a few reasons for that, and I think about this a lot, and I always kind of wonder if I had been approached by someone about joining ESP or like taking a class or something like that, like what would I have done? And a lot of the times ESP and NXIVM was all about like building relationships, and so that's what people would do when they would ask people to come join. It would be someone that they had a relationship with most of the time, and they would, I think they truly believed that what they were doing in that moment was something good. And a lot of people who were part of ESP and part of NXIVM still will say, even though it had this bad outcome, it did do good things for me. And I think that's something that is really hard for some people on the outside like us to wrap our minds around, that there was a good part of all of this. There was something people got out of all of this. And I think that's why people joined. That's why people, stuck it out until something worked. And that's why, they stayed. They believed that this was helping them. And I think in a lot of ways it did help people. I mean, in the episode you see Mark Vicente talk about Mark Elliott with Tourette's, and you kind of see this sequence of NXIVM curing Tourette's, and I don't really know, the science behind what they did, if they actually, were able to cure this or what, but I think that just shows that NXIVM really, and ESP and these classes really meant a lot of good things to a lot of people at the time. And so I think that kind of goes back to what we were speaking about with Daniel's question about how the witnesses were on the stand. I think that there is like almost like a bittersweetness about the whole thing for some people who are part of NXIVM. I just think that there are a lot of layers here, and it's definitely not a black and white situation. And I think that's why this story and kind of, where it's been and where it's going and where it came from is so interesting to people, because it's not, just right or wrong. There's all of this other kind of gray area in between. Daniel's asking if I spoke with people in the area by the compound. Yeah, so I actually had this one really fantastic source, and she did not want me to use her name in any of our reporting, but there is we did do a couple interviews with her where we, silhouetted her so you can't see her face, and we used a different name for her. And she was actually Alice and Mac's neighbor in the so the way that the condos in Knox Woods, where I'm like drawing a picture with my hands, the way that they work is it's like 4 on the bottom and I think there's 4 on the top, but it's like each corner of the square of each building is one of the condos, if that makes sense. So there's a road that goes through Knox Woods, and in this condo, like right next to it, Allison's was at this back corner next to the road, and this woman who I used to speak to was still on the road, like parallel to Allison's, if that makes sense. So, we like got to know each other pretty well, actually, and she would text me all the time when she would see people who she knew were members of NXIVM still in the neighborhood. She was like my little watchdog in the neighborhood, and I think she was like that because she was very nervous. She said she actually had an experience with Keith once while she was out walking her dog, and he wanted to talk to her and stuff, and she told me she got a very uneasy feeling from him, and it was, at night, one of these like walks that you always hear about Keith taking. And so she spoke to me quite a bit about that and about how uneasy it made her, and how when she found out what was going on, how she got even more, nervous about it. And she said her neighbors were nervous too. So I spoke with her, and I also, there's someone who I know who also, didn't want to be on the record, who lived on Oregon Trail, kind of near Nancy Salzman, kind of over in that area. And he would tell me some things, but most of that stuff was not for reporting. It was just for me looking out. But he would point me in the right direction sometimes, and it was always, whenever I would talk to these people who lived near Keith or Nancy or Allison or whoever it might be, they were all, it seemed like everyone knew. Like, it was like this thing that everyone in the neighborhood knew, but they didn't know if it was illegal. They didn't really know what was going on, but everyone kind of got that like, oh, something's not quite right here feeling. So there was definitely some intuition there, I think, from the neighbors about, what was going on. Let's see. I don't really have like a formal, I took some notes when I was watching the episode, but I don't really have like a formal rundown of, I don't want to ruin it. I still want you to go watch it if you want to go watch it. This isn't like meant as a replacement for going to watch The Vow or anything, but I just think it's interesting to discuss it and to kind of keep the story going, and things like that. So, let's see. Oh, so obviously, like, the way that NXIVM was able to continue was because of money that they had backing them through the Bronfman sisters, and also, these kind of, like, big names that were important in the community that people were bringing in. Oh, that one. I want to back up, actually, for a second before I get to kind of, the Hollywood aspect and the Emiliano Salinas aspect of that. One other thought that I wanted to mention about, why do people get sucked in? Why are they doing this? Like, how do they not see it? Those types of questions. I think that NXIVM was very good at finding people who had kind of like a hole within them, or they had a loss, or they had something that they were trying to find within themselves. They latched on to something where there was space that they could fill within people. And I think that was, a key way that they got people to join and really made them feel like they were part of something and that they had people who supported them and things like that. So I think it works, kind of like any other type of community would, where you just want to be part of something and you want something that makes you feel good and you want something that makes you feel like you're giving back to the community and doing all of these things. So I think that factors into people joining as well. So anyway, sorry, I kind of like skipped around there. But so there's like the Hollywood aspect where obviously I talked about Catherine in India, and then, you know, Nikki Klein from Battlestar Galactica was brought in, and also obviously, you know, Allison Mack, who is one of the other big players kind of in this whole thing. And one of the things that I found so interesting watching the old footage of Allison was like how different she looked than how she looked when we saw her at the courthouse. And it was like almost like it was a different person. And I don't really know why or how or what. You know, I'm not going to try to pretend to know the inner workings of the mind of Allison Mack. But for me, that was something that really stood out. I was like, wow, she looks so different. And those behind the scenes videos, I think, gave us a lot of. I know I always imagined, you know, well, what would it be like, you know, if you were hanging out with Keith Raniere and Nancy Salzman in Knox Woods and you were, you know, doing whatever it is they did in their normal day-to-day lives. And I just thought that some of the behind the scenes footage, especially there's a part where Keith kind of like walks in the door and he's got like sandals and socks on, and Mark is talking about how he's just like this kind of like bouncy weird guy and not what he expected and things like that. And it was just, that footage was really interesting to see, and really I think gave a better look at, you know, the people we're really dealing with when it comes to this case. So that was very eye-opening for me, because obviously, you know, you can go to these court cases and you can drive around these neighborhoods and you can read all these documents and you can interview all these people, but there's really nothing like having that inside look to really give you a good idea of kind of how things operated. So I thought that that was very interesting. So the episode like kind of wraps up with Mark and Sarah working their way up the stripe path. Which is basically like, if you see any photos or videos, they have like a little sash, and they'll all be different colors and things like that. And the different colors denote different like levels within the organization and things of that nature. I think it's always compared to like, you know, how karate works and things like that, you know, like black belt the highest and whatnot. And I always wonder if Keith got that from karate, because he did a little bit of that as a child. So I think it was a way for him to kind of, you know, integrate something he knew about into this thing he was kind of trying to build. So basically the episode wraps up with Mark and Sarah kind of, you know, climbing the stripe path, and then they end up opening the Vancouver Center. And I would say like really almost the entire episode is kind of this lighthearted and we're gonna change the world and this really like positive feeling. And then it's not until really like the last 2 minutes of the first episode where like that darkness comes in and Mark's wife Bonnie is like, there is something not right here. And I mentioned this kind of at the beginning of this live little chat, but I think that they did a very good job of kind of embodying, you know, what it was like to be a person who was in NXIVM and taking ESP classes, and then suddenly finding out, you know, there's all this stuff happening behind the scenes that like don't make this as like ethical, to use one of Keith's words, as maybe it's being presented as. So I think the mood of the first episode, although some of the information for someone like me was very repetitive, the mood I think was spot on. Bob wants to know, did I break that story locally or was it assigned? How did that work? So this story was going on like long before I had ever come to Albany. So I moved to Albany in 2015. I believe 2015. Yeah, that sounds right. And the story broke in the New York Times in the fall of 2017, if I'm getting my timeline in my mind correct there. So there were several people who had been in the Albany area well before I was, who were working on this story. The Times Union tried to, you know, do some stuff a couple of times. A fantastic journalist by the name of Chet Hardin actually was able to meet with Keith Raniere once for his reporting, And, I've spoken to him a few times. He was at the trial a little bit. He and Tony Natale are working on a podcast actually called The Fall, and I can't wait for it to come out because they have a totally different perspective as well from all of this. So I think it's really great that we're getting, kind of like a slew of perspectives on this. As a truth seeker, again, we're sticking to the facts here. I guess I'll put a little bit of opinion in there just when it's given. So anyway, there were a lot of people who worked on covering this story well before I was ever in Albany. But when that New York Times article came out, I said, oh my God, I'll never forget. I was reading it. I was like sitting on my bed. I was like scrolling through my phone, and I was like, this can't be Albany, New York. I was like, this has got to be like Albany, Georgia. There's no way this is happening. Like, if you're familiar with the Albany area, I was living in Cohoes, and the compound is in Clifton Park. It's like literally a 10-minute drive from where I was living. I was like, there is no way that this is happening 10 minutes from me. And I read the story in like total awe. And I went in to work the next day and I said, we have to cover this. And Chris was like on board with me. And it's kind of funny because NXIVM, I think, was kind of like the jumping off point of he and I working together for almost the entire last 2 years that I was working at Channel 10 in Albany. And so we went, and the paper had come out the day before, and he was like, I know we can go get this paper. I know Stewart's keeps the day-old papers, and they, ship them all back to the Times at the end of the week or something like that. And so we went to the Stewart's down the street, and lo and behold, they had a copy of it, and I still have it. And we were going to, go and do this story, and I can't even remember what it was, but something else came up that day that they needed to move us to. So they moved us, and that was like the end of it for a couple months. But when Keith got arrested by the feds in Mexico and the FBI started raiding all the houses in Knox Woods, that's when it really kicked off. And I said, I wanted to cover this like a couple months ago, and like, you're gonna let me cover this now. So I don't know if that, I don't know what you would consider that. If I broke it locally, probably not, because the Times Union had been doing this story well before I came along. Did I want to work on this story? Like, desperately. It was just like one of those things that I latched onto, and I was just like enthralled by this. And I was like, this is a layered story, and there are people who need to have their voices heard, and this is my job to like give a voice to these people who need it. I like was scouring Facebook and Twitter and just like all the social media and like anything I could find, and I was reaching out to so many people to try on that first day. I was trying to find, anyone I could talk to who knew anything about this. And finally, Tony Natale messaged me back on Facebook, and I like didn't know it at the time, but she was the best possible person who could have reached back out to me. And it kind of just like went from there. We did a Skype interview, and then eventually we went and we interviewed her at her home, and we just like kept on the story. It was like any day that there was something NXIVM related, I was pitching the story and I was doing it. And I think my newsroom kind of got tired of it after a while, just because I was so into it. It was like my life, I have this like 5-inch binder like full of all of this stuff still. So it was just like one of those things that hit me in the heart, and I just knew it needed to be covered. So that's kind of how that worked. Kind of a long-winded answer to your question, Bob. Let's see. Oh, Claire Bronfman with her sentencing and Keith's. Yeah, that whole thing is wild. It's crazy that someone with so much money in such a delicate predicament, we'll call it, still thinks that they can use that to kind of, get away with stuff still. So that's kind of like a great question to go into the other thing I wanted to talk about today, because last week the Eastern District sent out some new court documents, and it's basically the prosecution's response to it's called a sentencing memorandum. So it's basically they're trying to decide the sentencing guidelines for Keith. And first of all, it is crazy, like, never mind that we're dealing with this like alleged sex cult, and we've gone through like 3 years of awaiting this, and then we have this pandemic that is pushing back all of these sentencings, not only Keith's, but it's really like tying up tons of stuff in the federal government. And like maybe that's probably a different discussion, but that in itself is just, I know, really tough for some people who are awaiting justice. But anyway, so the sentencing memorandum came out, and the prosecution responded to it for their sentencing guidelines. And so basically guidelines, if you don't know how the court system works, is certain things are given they're given like point systems kind of, and how many ever points you end up with kind of puts you in a certain bracket as far as like how long you can get sentenced for. And that happens in the federal government, that happens, in county court, all sorts of things. So it's kind of standard. But so the sentencing memorandum is basically the prosecution and the defense making their case to the judge about where they want those guidelines to stand, essentially. So this one was from the prosecution, and they are asking for a sentencing guideline of life in prison. Guys, that is wild. Sorry, that motorcycle was really loud. I don't know if you guys could hear it. But basically they say it's all about, protecting the public, and that's why they're asking for it. And I did like a little bit of research on life imprisonment from federal cases, and it turns out it is actually super rare. So the most recent data I could find was in 2013, and only 150 people in the entire federal court system were sentenced to life in prison. So that's really not that many in like the grand scheme of thinking about like how many people go through federal trials and things like that. So the top reasons were drug trafficking, murder, extortion, and wouldn't you believe, racketeering. So that has Keith Raniere's name all over it. Also in this court document, some like really, really wild stuff about kind of how Raniere has been acting in prison since he's been in there after his conviction. I guess he's been like contacting his supporters, has like massive contempt for the victims and the prosecution and even the judge, which is insane. So basically the prosecution goes over like the guidelines, and they're like, okay, on the basic guidelines of all of these things that he was found guilty for, he gets a 47. Like I mentioned, there's like a point system. So then they kind of go through and they're like, well, he had a leadership role, so we should add 4 levels of enhancement. So I don't know if that means like 4 points or like puts you up another bracket. I'm not really sure about the details, but they want to add more, so he would be higher than a 47. They also wanted to add a 2-level enhancement for his crimes against Camilla, and a 2-level enhancement for the crimes against Daniela. Specifically, they were talking about when he was keeping her in the room, she had like a toothache, and she kept asking for some medical attention, and he refused her medical attention. So I guess that gains him some enhancements. So basically they do all of this math, and also the fact that like he's showing no remorse also plays in to where they can put these sentencing guidelines. So they're talking about all of that. One of the craziest things, and I think, Daniel, this kind of goes back to like the group still being active, is that apparently the prosecution is saying that Keith directed some supporters to set up a podcast, basically like his side of things, and do this podcast. He also wants them to set up a contest for anyone who can find like holes in the prosecution's argument against him, for them to like win something. I don't know. That's bizarre. If you come across that, please don't do it. So that is basically all that was in those court documents. So the crux of it is that they're asking for a guideline of a life sentence. So that doesn't mean that he would get life in prison. It just gives the judge the opportunity, if he sets those guidelines, to sentence him to life in prison, if that makes any sort of sense. So yeah, that's about all I've got for now, unless there are any other questions out there. A $25,000 prize for the contest, Daniel? That is crazy. So that just shows you like how much money is really behind it. I must have missed that part in there. They're also asking for a lot of restitution to the victims and things like that. But oh my goodness, that is insane. I mean, like, $25,000 would be nice, but I don't know. It's like dirty money. I would never do that. But yeah, so if you have any other questions, I know that we're on a little bit of a delay from when I'm actually talking and when you're seeing this. So if there's any other questions, drop them in. I will stall a little bit here just to see if there's anything else that you guys want to talk about. The second episode of The Vow is out streaming now. It's on, again, HBO Max. I have not watched it yet because I have had a crazy schedule the past couple of days. Unfortunately, I can't watch it live because it airs at 10 on Sundays, and I am anchoring the news at 10 on Sundays, so I can't really watch it live. I usually end up watching it on Mondays or Tuesdays, so maybe I'll watch it tonight or tomorrow. But if you guys have any suggestions about, you know, what types of stuff you'd like to see or what you want to talk about, or I don't know, the like format of these little live chats, if you want me to keep doing them, let me know. Tell your friends, tell your dog friends. Right, buddy? Hi. You've been so good up there. Yeah, so, Daniel says the second episode is bonkers. I can't wait to watch it. I'm sure, like, the first one was so, like, docile as far as, you know, what the details of NXIVM are, that I know that it's just gonna get crazy. And it's so funny because Chris and I text about this sometimes because we're still in touch, but I get so excited to watch or read or, like, anything that has to do with NXIVM, even though I know like the whole story. But I don't know. I guess it's just that kind of thing for me. So since it's Banana Land, I'm probably gonna go watch it right now. So I'll take some notes about the like top things that happen, and we'll put those together for next week. Let me know if you guys think like Tuesdays at 8 are good times to do this. It's good for me, but if it's not good for people who really want to see it, then I can like move things around. Oh, I do have a Reddit account. I'm gonna have to go and check that out. Oh, it would be great, Daniel, if you set up a forum there for these little live chats and people could put in, oh yes, ask me anything would be so cool. Yes, that's a great idea. I don't know what my like Reddit account is. If I can like, I don't know if I can like drop a link if I find I am not like the Reddit expert in this house. My boyfriend is on it like every day, and he really knows a lot more about it than I do. Wow, my computer is so slow right now. I mainly use Reddit to look for story ideas. I don't really like interact in it a lot, but it's definitely a great forum. Well, I thought I had one. Daniel, get at me on like Twitter or something, and when I figure out how to work Reddit, we can like connect on there or whatever. So yeah, I guess that like pretty much wraps it up. Yes, you can come down. Come on. Come on. You can do it. Jump. Jump. Around with my stuff. Go ahead. Go. He's trying to jump down, but he like won't do it. So yeah, that like pretty much wraps it up. Good boy. That wraps it up for us tonight, I think. I hope you guys enjoyed this and got something out of it and learned something new, or at least saw what I look like without makeup and my hair done, whatever it is. So, again, anything that you guys want to talk about next time, you can call me, tweet me if you want to reach me, Facebook me, Instagram me, or I'm going to also try to find a way to, I think YouTube will save this, and I'm going to try to find a way to like post it so that people who weren't able to join us live can watch it. So hopefully I can figure out how to work that, and things will be a little bit smoother next week. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight, and yeah, that's it. We'll see you next week. Bye.